Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of All the Good Men, where we have an absolutely fucking terrific man, Adam Schlender. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, Adam. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm so excited to have this chat. We had like a little mini conversation at a dinner table once, and I was like, we need to extend this, and other
Yeah,
people need to hear this.
that's right. We just like launched right into the podcast the moment we met, actually. So
Pretty
thank you
much.
so much. It's a real honor to be on your show.
Yeah, thank you. So, Adam is a visionary entrepreneur. He's the founder of Opus, and he invented the sound bed, which is an incredible revolutionary sound healing device that is this incredible tool for nervous system, emotional regulation. It's an incredible invention from what I know about it so far. And with a first principles somatic approach to healing and growth, and this deep understanding of the influence of sound on the physical and energetic bodies, Adam has this merging of science and ancient wisdom to create these transformative practices and tools and technology that unlock expansive personal growth. And Adam has this training program, Expansive Sacred Union, or ESU, which is an evolutionary framework drawing from IFS, which is internal family systems, somatic experiencing, Vedic teachings, left hand path tantra, and it's designed to help individuals and couples live a life of ever expanding pleasure, power, purpose. So much of what I love about all of this is that you're combining so many deep deeply studied practices. So you're combining Vedic practices, tantric practices, this ancient wisdom with modern science and with the ever expanding and ever deepening understanding of how our nervous system responds to sound and utilizing modern technology for that, which is so fucking inspiring. I love it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin where, as a matter of pride, people didn't feel their feelings, and everything's fine all the time. And as I guess, a child of the '90s in a small town, the model of masculinity and how men, at least among my peers, treated women and talked about women and regarded sexuality, so at a very young age felt like not it to me.
Yeah.
And I really didn't have models or mentors or tools at that time. So as also as someone who has like a mother who is just like the embodiment of the the loving, nurturing feminine, like on 11, couldn't turn the volume up anymore to the
Oh,
point of being almost dysfunctional in the world, like hard to navigate, but just this beautiful, symbol of like what that essence is in the world. Like anything that was not in reverence to her and who she is, like as a woman, felt was like wrong in my body, and I didn't know what to do with that for a long time. And eventually, as I, you know, left my small town, went to college, moved to Florida, experienced more and more of the world, it just became clear to me before I was working on any of these projects that like the intelligence in the body and the way that we feel is kind of foundational to the reality that we create for ourselves. So a lot of my work has really just emerged from seeking tools for myself to now do what I understand is regulating my nervous system and regulating my emotions. I didn't have that language in my early 20s, uh,
yeah.
but it has brought me here and to you ultimately.
Beautiful. Beautiful. It's great to hear right off the bat about a little bit about your relationship with your mother and how that has this sort of dichotomy of like somebody who is deeply caring, deeply nurturing, and then growing up in a place where hiding your feelings was the thing to do, and kind of the navigation of having both of those imprints on your
Yeah,
system from quite
yeah,
an early age. And something that struck me when I first met you was a couple of things. And one was that I felt that you were deeply listening to the space around you. It felt like you were picking up on a lot of things. It felt like you were picking up on people's feelings. It felt like you were attuned.
Mhm.
And it also felt like I felt this sense of dedication and
Mm.
devotion in just your way of speaking, in the ways that I was watching you interact with other people, and the way that you and I were interacting. Even in one of our first interactions was you coming up to me and my husband and being like, "Can I wow you?" And just giving us a whole wow experience, and like wow, and complimenting us. And everything that you said was very felt very accurate and poignant, and like you were paying attention. That was something I really noticed. And for me, that's quite that comes along with a deep nervous system attunement. If your nervous system is regulated, there okay, I'm gonna actually there are two different ways to be deeply attuned, and one can come from hypervigilance, which is when the nervous system is not necessarily relaxed, and then another can come from I'm relaxed and I'm centered in my body, and so I'm present and I'm absorbing. And what I really felt from our interactions was that you were very much in yourself, very centered, but also deeply taking in the world around you and deeply observing. And so I didn't know any of the projects that you've worked on or the inventions that you've created or developed, but it makes so much sense to me that there's this aspect of nervous system regulation. I'm seated back within myself, and then I'm listening to what's happening in the world around me. That was
Mhm.
so beautifully translated just in a couple of simple conversations that we had.
Mm. Thank you for noticing.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear a little bit more about your journey with that, what you were just speaking to, with all these tools that you now have for regulating your nervous system, being within your body, listening to the space around you, listening. So much of your work is, at least it seems like, about around listening and allowing your body to kind of perceive what's happening in the world around you.
Yeah.
Can you share a little about your journey with that?
Yeah, sure.
And if you're like, girl, you're jumping to conclusions. This is your projection. Just let me know. This is
Yeah,
what I
yeah. I'm just I'm listening for where to start. Um, I can tell briefly sort of the mystical version of the founding of my company Opus, which was like a big moment of spiritual awakening, and I think brought something that I'd been doing unconsciously for a lot of my life into something that I was very consciously doing, and with that, a lot of really rapid growth and sensitivity to noticing subtle energies, which the more you give them attention, the less subtle they become, and the more useful that attunement and sensing what's going on in your system and other people's systems becomes, is it becomes more visceral and tangible. Um, I I was at a place in my career and life 6 years ago where I didn't know what to do with it, but like everything was just feeling wrong. Everything was just feeling
Mm,
blocked and stuck. And I think I'm a quite creative person. Like I just want to make art out of everything all the time. It's like in my nature, and I was feeling creatively blocked. Like my relationship, my career, I didn't know what to do with it, but nothing was feeling right inside of me. And I wasn't particularly spiritual. I was actually kind of like on the new atheist train, like listening to a lot of Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens at the time, and sort of like proudly had a scientific, rational worldview. But I was feeling quite desperate, and so I just like opened myself up, like asking for help for the first time in my life, uh, praying,
mm,
if you will. And and what happened in that moment is like a voice inside of me said, "It's time to do what you came here to do immediately," which felt very comforting.
mm,
I was like, "Oh God, yeah." Like a lot of us have this sense like there's something I'm supposed to do. Like I came here for a reason, and when we feel on our path, we feel really juiced and inspired. And when we feel disconnected from that, we all sort of symptomatic things show up. And so it felt really comforting for a moment. And then I thought, well, if I knew what that was, I'd be doing it already, you asshole. That's why I'm calling.
You're like immediately.
Yeah, yeah, immediately. Yeah, if I knew what that was, I'd be doing it, right? But that was actually quite a profound spiritual awakening because I recognized that I was genuinely asking that question to someone or something.
Mm,
Like I meant it, and there was something inside of me that replied, and that was really like I didn't appreciate it for actually years, but that was really powerful. That distinction, that unblending, like in IFS, it's unblending these voices in our head and blending these parts of ourselves that have different objectives. And it also helped me unblend the story in my head from the feeling in my body. Because when I had that sort of moment of realization of like, oh, my internal landscape is sort of made up of all these different signals that I'm blending together, but I actually can sort of parse them apart and relate to them individually and have more agency and consciousness over my experience. I also then was sort of flooded with this feeling like a pilot light had been on in my heart for 10 years.
Yeah.
I forgot about, and it got churned up into like a roaring flame all of a sudden. And it was like this feeling of, I now recognize like even erotic aliveness and just like pleasurable sensation in my body, just the rapture, the bliss of feeling alive.
Yeah.
And it's always in there, and it's always in there, and it's underneath decades of programming and trauma and stress. Not something that we acquire from outside of ourselves, which is very central to so many wisdom traditions. But I just had a visceral experience of it in one moment,
Yeah.
and it also became clear in that moment that it's like, oh, this feeling is actually what I'm after. Like all the things that I'm trying to like muscle into the world is actually in pursuit of feeling more of this feeling all of the time.
Mm.
So what if I instead of trying to like build a perfect map to lead me to the end goal of feeling this way, realizing that in my dark night of the soul moment, in 30 seconds, I went from zero to like a sense of like pure rapturous bliss, and that was available inside of me,
Mm.
presumably, if now also in every moment at all times. Like, what if I make the work that I'm doing central to helping myself cultivate this feeling and more of it, and let it sort of act like a compass, let me use it as a decision making matrix of like decisions and relationships and aspects of my career, the way that I'm creating and serving in the world. If it feels resonant with this feeling and it amplifies this feeling, like, can that be like a yes, and that just be clear? And if it's not, then I just sort of continue to follow this internal signal, this internal compass, which is maybe sort of like an esoteric frame, but it became like immediately actionable. I was like, oh, this job that I've been doing for 6 years, this industry doesn't like me, doesn't amplify that feeling, doesn't serve me, and I've actually known that for quite a long time. This relationship that I'm in, where we deeply love each other and it makes so much sense, but we're not wanting the same life, uh,
Yeah.
is very clear.
Right.
And so in sort of a moment, I was like, okay, if I'm really going to take this to heart, I start making very different decisions about my life immediately.
Yeah.
And because it was a feeling, I was sort of early on my spiritual journey and personal development journey at the time. I wasn't really meditating yet. I'd like gone to one breath workshop. I had done psychedelics on purpose once, sort of revisited them after some poor decisions in my 20s. And it just became clear that like it's the subtle sensations, and we it's not the reaching for peak experience, because again that sort of like puts it outside of ourselves, but it's like, how can we begin to just move even gently the energy inside of our systems towards this feeling that is more expansive,
Right.
and sort of self-fulfilling, self motivating.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Part of what I love about this is that I think sometimes we can get, and I'll say we as in everybody, but I specifically hear about this from men, is this desire to be living on purpose, to be living in their purpose.
Mm,
And sometimes I think we can get a little bit stuck on what is the thing that is my purpose? What is the action that is my purpose? What is the
mm,
thing that I create? What is the career path that I do? And the way that I see purpose is it's actually, this is the energy that I'm carrying with me. And it's
that's
very,
right.
very true to me. And it's
That's
very
right.
specific to me.
That's
And
right.
my purpose is being in that feeling. It's being in that essence. And then my, maybe we could call them missions, are the ways that I live out that feeling, the things that spark that feeling, the areas where I get to show up fully with that purpose.
Yes,
But what I love about what you're sharing is that in this moment, when in a way your purpose came to you, it wasn't here's the exact thing I need to do in the world. It was here's the feeling that is my North Star. Here's the feeling that is my guidepost.
that's right. And I would love to come back and talk more about your lens and how you taught about attachment styles, because it's actually like really integrated into my life in a really powerful way. But yet, exactly to your point, it's this feeling of purpose, and when we get attached to, you know, what that looks like, as though it should be one thing for the rest of our lives, we stop paying attention and listening to those inner signals, and we start sort of like holding very tightly to one version of reality or one iteration of ourselves, and then over time that sort of builds up into something that becomes, I think, intolerable.
Right.
In the expansive sacred union work, which you touched on, a lot we can say about that. But one of, it sort of is been my own internal operating system that I've now sort of distilled down and codified in a way that it can be translated to other people. That's helped me, build some things that I'm very proud of under very challenging circumstances,
Mm.
and it's both sort of like present moment awareness, and like that's sort of like where we're acting on reality in our life, and it's also this sort of macro view of the natural cycles of expansion and contraction, death and rebirth, that as a human, and particularly a man seeking his purpose, I feel like is sort of a new feature of our modern age. Like in our parents' generation, just the way that the world worked is you sort of had like a North Star that looked like a particular career or a particular goal, and and a relationship, and you signed up for that in your early 20s when you don't really know much about yourself or about the world, which is kind of insane. And then you just like remain committed and devoted to that for your whole life. And we now are of a generation where your purpose and what that looks like, and what it's manifesting in the world, is likely going to evolve and change every 3, 4, 5 years or so. Like we can, it's the pattern of almost everyone I know my age, and so we can expect that, and we can expect those cycles, and that there will need to be kind of like a somatic internal recalibration to detaching, and this applies for me even in Opus. Like I realized that I had gotten to a place where I was projecting my purpose onto this company and onto this product, and there was internal dissonance that was coming from that. And I could tell myself the story of like, but this is exactly the manifestation of the thing that was the feeling that was my spiritual awakening. So like this has to be it and only it forever and ever and ever. And it was, it was starting to not feel good in my body, and it was also, I think, having me make decisions that weren't coming from a place of wholeness and like true self integrity,
Right.
and the most empowered choices that are ultimately the things that then become the most in service to the mission anyway.
Totally. It's like
Right.
evolutionary purpose, evolutionary missions that actually can shift as your inner world and your inner guideposts shift. There was actually a moment that was one of the most inspiring moments for me in regards to purpose, and it was, I don't know, probably 10, 15 years ago, and I was driving on the highway in Vermont, and I pulled over to use the restroom, and there was a woman in the bathroom, and she was cleaning the bathroom. She was like scrubbing the toilets, and she was singing, and she had the most beautiful voice, and it was because of the tile walls, it was just echoing in the most gorgeous way, and her voice was like an expression of her love is what it felt like. I
Yeah.
was sitting there just like in the stall peeing as she was like cleaning, and I was like, this woman is living her purpose. This might not be her ideal mission. Who knows? I don't know if that's, maybe that is her highest ideal, but that might not be the way, that might not be her choice of here's my ideal career path. But no matter where she is and what she's doing, she's living her purpose. Again, this is
Yeah.
like my own projection of it, and what I interpreted of it. But
Yeah.
for me, it was this reminder of no matter what I do, I bring my essence. No matter what I do, I bring that beauty to the world. I bring my purpose to the world. And so we can get so caught up, like you said, in this is the thing. But
Mm.
if we're not bringing that essence of ourselves, if we're not peeling back the layers to find that feeling of whatever it is, of beauty, of truth, of honest joy, of love, whatever that is, whatever that purpose, that thread is for us,
Yeah.
it's, that's the point.
Yeah, and when you're in the presence of it, you feel it, right? It's like remove the context and being in the bathroom and all of that. Like if you just had your eyes closed, blindfolded, and you like came into the energetic field of that woman, there would be like something that would resonate with you.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
and yeah, and like that being the thing that drives us and helps us navigate. Which again, in my own experience, it's a product. It's a process of just keeping coming back to it and keeping coming back to it
Yeah.
and keeping coming back to it.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah,
Okay, so you said you wanted to talk about attachment.
yeah, and which is really so. You talked about attachment styles through the lens of uh, island and wave and anchor.
Mhm. And
So
just for context,
mhm,
Adam and I met at a retreat that I was teaching at, and one of the subjects that I was teaching on was around attachment and intimacy and all of that.
yeah, and I really appreciated. It felt like a much more empowered lens to think about what would be called anxious attachment as a wave, and avoidant attachment as an island, and then of course the concept of anchor. And you led us through some really beautiful exercises that really helped me notice the subtle energy of like where I'm coming off my I'm coming off my center. I'm sort of giving my power away, or I'm contracting. We notice it when we've kind of gotten to the extremes, but it begins with something that's a lot more subtle. So the practices that you led us through, of just like feeling into that subtle energy one way or another, was really really powerful for me. So thank you. Like I've really taken that with me into my life. And as I started kind of viewing the world through that lens and applying it more and more, it like struck me that this like masculine feminine internal and in relationship to someone energy is this sort of process of like islanding and waving, and that's like juicy and beautiful, and like the dance that we get to do together. And there are moments in relationship, romantic or otherwise, where it's like I want to merge into you, and I want to just like envelop you in like the ocean of my body and my love. And there's moments where I want to feel you from a distance, and like so like that's beautiful. But the thing that sort of landed for me is like, oh, when we're anchored, if we make being anchored and feeling anchored the the foundation, the thing that we come back to first, now we can, from a more liberated, creative, whole place, like do the dance of like islanding and waving, which I've found even applies in like business negotiations and things, which is super fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's like,
Yeah.
oh,
And that's part of what I love about, and the framework of island and wave and anchor, as opposed to anxious, avoidant, and secure, comes from Stan Tatkin. And I love it because it de-shamifies the whole thing, because no one wants to be avoidant or anxious.
right.
But when you put it in terms of island and wave, there are unhealthy expressions of that. And there are also healthy expressions of that. There are
Mhm.
deeply integrated expressions of it. And we can, like you said, we can find actually the beauty of what it feels like to be around an island who's so deeply self sufficient and reliable in the ways that they take care of themselves, and like strongly boundaried. And then a wave who brings so much of this movement and excitement and leans in and makes sure that the conversations happen. And there's so much beauty to both of those. And so
Yeah.
when we de-shamify it and move towards being anchored, we get to actually engage with those parts of ourselves with a lot of playfulness and also just a lot of self forgiveness instead of like, why
Right.
am I being like this? Why am I waving? Why am I? It's like, this is happening, and it's an opportunity for us to meet ourselves and to heal what needs to be healed, what wants to be healed, what's ready to be healed. But it takes some of the heaviness out of it and allows it to be a little more playful.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, it takes the value judgment out of it for sure.
Yeah.
And it allows like you and the person you're relating to come in direct contact with reality. Like for me as a man, if what's being presented to me is being presented to me through the lens and with the energy of like, this is a way in which I am not man enough, this is a way that I am not holding you enough, this is a way that I am not protecting, providing enough, which I completely understand, but like energetically it's expensive.
Mm.
Like I've done a tremendous amount of work to not like to be able to like receive any kind of inputs and feedback and not like contract into a contraction and a trigger. But if I'm unresourced, like that sort of like energy or communication to me, it requires energy to hold it, and like not let it sort of get into my wounding, which despite all the work certainly still there and still have it. But when it can be communicated in this way of like, this is the experience that I'm having, I'm in my wave right now, here's the story that I'm telling, whether there's an opportunity for improvement in my behavior or not, it's like I can meet it with like, this is an opportunity to love you better, which I like desperately want. Like I desperately want to love you better. And when I talk to men, sort of regardless of how they're showing up in their relationship, they are often, and I guess universally so far in my experience, like inspired by the idea of loving their partner better.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is because like that is like part of their purpose, whether they
Right.
identify it or not. Like I want to be
Mhm.
an extraordinary partner, an extraordinary lover, and when it can be with that more expansive energy, creative, moving towards what we want, that very same input is now something that I feel more connected to you, and I feel like we can have like like I want to show. I actually, it innately makes me want to show up in the way that you are probably asking for in the first place.
Right, right. Instead of like, I need more from you, you're not doing enough, it turns into, I'm feeling wavy about this thing, where I'm like noticing that there's this moving towards you, or craving for more intimacy, and having an insecurity come up. It puts it into a different perspective, which then allows you to not be like, well, I guess I'll just never be enough, and actually allows you to shift into, I hear that, and I'm also maybe tracking where I'm islanding out a little bit, or
Yeah,
where I'm feeling resistant or feeling suffocated or feeling whatever it is that's here. And it gets a
yeah,
little more languaging around that.
yeah. And it takes something that was a source of disconnection and now makes it a source of intimacy.
Fuck yes.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
It's
working.
working.
Do you find that you are typically an island in relationships, or do you find that you're typically a wave, or that you kind of alternate?
Yeah, certainly both. It was also introduced to me at the retreat that like our energy centers as a man or a woman are sort of by their nature giving or receiving poles,
Mhm.
and that a man actually wants to receive in his heart, which again, that just like subtle detail, which is I've probably heard maybe other places, but just in the context of your work, really landed for me in a new way. Like, and I've been kind of viewing my own experience and witnessing other people um, through that lens. So like I notice that when I'm not receiving enough love, like my system tries to find balance by overcompensating.
Mm.
It's in my nature to like reach out. I think of someone, I think warmly of someone, and like I send them a nice text message or a voice memo of just like wowing them or of appreciation. There's like a version of that that's coming from wholeness, and I've also identified that there's a version of that where it's like this is a overactive response to my unmet need to like receive love into my heart chakra, like receive love energy in my heart chakra. My heart is seeking balance, and now all of a sudden I'm like love bombing 10 people on text message, which is a total sequitur. I was like on a podcast and all of a sudden I'm feeling like a, a, a vacuum in my heart. And I feel this like sudden impulse to like love bomb people. Right.
Mhm.
Like that's like a phenomenon that's happened for a long time. And I now recognize that like, oh shit, like that didn't come from nowhere. Like the
Mm.
like, energy manifested that into an experience in some way, and it was actually like an overcompensation in trying to find balance.
Interesting,
And
interesting.
and I've also, one of the things I think comes up uh, in this work in our modern age is You have women who, as a strategy in reaction to maybe not having a stable masculine figure energetically in their life, whatever that might look like. Um, could be have like a very loving, providing father, but just like emotionally unavailable or whatever it may be. Uh, that I talk about with ESU first principles, like their solar plexus is like seeking balance, right? The system just like wants to return to balance, and because there's sort of this vacuum, even though the solar plexus of a biological woman is sort of innately wired and designed to like receive energy in that center, it has to overcompensate. So it actually becomes more hyperactive, and it becomes more sort of natural feeling to be like the one in the with authority and with power. And and I think something that we probably both see a lot in our work is like boss badass woman who's like wanting so desperately to relax and surrender into her feminine and be held by a man, and also simultaneously is like looking for the other shoe to drop, and like not the moment that she's feeling a little bit secure, doesn't trust it, and then kind of snaps back into the default mode. And so then what happens for men, and I've been here, is like I'm like hearing the request to be in more leadership or be holding and controlling the structure, and I feel like every time I slip a little bit or every time I stick my head out of the hole, I get kicked in the face. And then over time I just throw my hands up and I go, babe, tell me what you want me to do. And now we're feeling disconnected. There's no polarity, there's no erotic charge, and we're both feeling confused and frustrated because we love each other so much. Like, what the hell is happening? We're approaching that integration into wholeness as men and women, and men deeply needing rituals of initiation to like know what that imprint is in our bodies, right? It's like we've been sort of told that it's oppressive to women, actually. And we've witnessed, warrior energy as something that's oppressive or abusive. And I think unconsciously for myself and many men who have done the work of developing emotional sensitivity, awareness, and intelligence, like we're now reintegrating that, learning how to reintegrate that aspect of ourselves, and helping our systems learn to trust that it can be both. Like a, we can be fierce and have our hearts open. We can be dangerous, and the women in our life will actually feel like they can soften more, trusting that like we're fierce, but we're fighting for them, not against them.
And
And
creating that new template of that
one
new slash ancient template of that.
exactly. So I think there's so much, and I think men's work is becoming more and more prevalent, which is amazing, and these sort of initiatory experiences are becoming more and more prevalent. And in my ESU work and for myself, it's like bring that back to like first principles of like what's happening in my system in the moment, and like what is the somatic experience of that warrior, protector, provider, masculine energy, and what inputs into my system, what relationships, like move that energy in different ways, and how can I learn to regulate that appropriately in a way that's useful. And what I've really found and begun practicing for myself, and again, it just sort of like landed like really deeply at the retreat, is like just literally just cultivating the energy, like the penetrative energy of my solar plexus, and like not getting into story or strategy or anything, but like if I just show up in the world with that, I experience women softening in my presence more. Like, and it's just a feeling. I'm not trying to be conscious of my body language. Like there's no other game that I'm playing other than if I'm holding sort of the space of this energy, and their system doesn't feel like it needs to compensate to like fill the vacuum, then their system can just naturally like open and
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, and I really feel it's both of us in
Mhm.
that scenario, us meaning women and men, learning to trust that energy, because I know for myself I've definitely fallen into that before, where I want I want a man to hold the structure for me, or to be a certain energy for me, and then the second that it maybe feels a little bit like it's not there, then I like, well,
Yeah.
I better move forward and become that,
Yeah.
as opposed to trusting it. And it comes from this fear of not having structure, and it comes from this fear of generations and generations of not a lot of really great examples of healthy, strong, powerful, protective, safe, loving, tender men.
Yeah.
And it comes from that, oh God, do I need to be that for myself, on top of this deep longing, deep, deep, deep longing to trust men
Yeah.
and to trust that energy. And so, like you're saying, it's the more that you embody that feeling, as opposed to a performative, it's just like with the purpose piece. If you're trying to do the thing as opposed to just becoming it, then
Yeah.
it is way harder to maintain. But when you just return back to that feeling,
Right.
you feel it and you learn to trust it. And then we feel it and we learn to trust it. And we can continuously soften into it, or
Yeah.
lean into it, or poke against it, or however we're engaging with it. But it's a it's a retemplating, truly.
Yeah. And as a badass woman who also has like done the work to be remarkably like integrated and be able to like dance in the full spectrum of energy, which is I really see and celebrate about you. And just you modeling that for us on the retreat was like really really inspiring and beautiful. And also watching you do that dance and in your relationship was also really really inspiring.
Mm.
How can we help men who are sort of like doing this on the fly and doing this in real time, and it's like, as long as we like stay in the arena together, right, and as long as we can maintain a certain level of awareness of like none neither side of the equation was sort of like given the perfect given all of the tools, and so it's like we have to do it together, and we have to do it together lovingly.
Which I'll say, thank God neither of us was given all the tools.
Yeah.
Like, thank God we need each other.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. How can we do a better job of like being in this process that we're in? And I think, and I know for myself, and uh, like all the men that I talk to and work with, it's like we want so desperately for you to feel safe with us. We want so desperately for you to feel like you can be in your feminine and in your magic. And it's like we also see that like you being in your like alpha gangster badass energy is like a amazing beautiful part of you that's attractive, and that you want to be in that mode and dance sometimes. I think we as men, falling into like the identity and purpose piece of it, it's like this masculine enough is something that you've achieved, and now it's like enlightenment, like you've achieved it and now you're just there forever, but you haven't achieved it yet, right? um Versus, like, I know for myself, like I embody that beautifully sometimes in ways that women who I really respect and I think see me like celebrate,
Mm.
and I totally collapse into my little boy who just wants to curl up in the fetal position and be held sometimes.
Yeah.
So like and that's also beautiful. And it's like, how can men clean up our side of the street, I guess it would be one way of saying
Yeah.
it,
Mhm.
where you can feel safe even while we can find each other even while we're in process, even though it's the I think the that it will ever be like 100%, 100% of the time is an illusion.
Yeah.
um and and yeah, I guess, yeah, what I'm looking for insights and pro tips for how we can navigate this better.
Yeah, I love that question. And something that you spoke to a few minutes ago really, I think, hits the nail on the head with this one, which is that you've done so much work to not be reactive, or I think the way you said it was to be able to receive feedback and pointers. And I think not just for men, but for all of us, to hear what the other person is experiencing and to take that in not as I'm not enough, I'm not masculine enough, I'm not feminine enough, I'm too masculine, I'm too feminine, whatever it is,
Mhm.
to really do the work to be able to hear it, to be able to take it in, to be able to receive it, and to have grace for the other person's experience when we're maybe the second you slip, we're like, see, I told you, I knew I had to do it myself, or
Yeah, totally.
whatever it is, to have grace for each other. Again, this is like for both of us, but to have grace for the process and to understand that when I say we need each other, I really I mean that in the most healthy, beautiful, interdependent, not codependent way.
Yeah.
And to honor and acknowledge, okay, we are all trying to reestablish and refine this new template for how we relate to one another.
Mhm.
And that doesn't mean you're a man and you always need to be in your masculine, holding this, doing ABC, holding the structure, doing all of this so that I can soften all the time and be in my feminine float. Like that, for me, that isn't what the new template looks like. There needs to be spaciousness for us to be whole humans with the choice, just like we talked about, there's then choice to be island and wave and kind of play with it, with the
Yeah.
choice to be polarized in
Mhm.
sexual union, in relationships, in moments, in different dynamics. It becomes a choice, not a you need to cut off certain parts of yourself, certain aspects of yourself, and the capacity to say, I would really love to be supported in this way, or I would really love to feel like you're receiving my touch even more deeply, or I would
Mhm.
really love to feel like you're supporting me with that, with the structural space for my emotions or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But to have grace around it and to not have it be this dogmatic, here's what I need to do, here's what you need to do, and to
Mhm.
really truly find respect for ourselves and each other as we embody all these different pieces.
Mhm.
And it was funny, I asked like hundreds of women, what are you looking for in a male partner? And the first thing that they said was presence. And the second or third thing was he has a good relationship to his masculine energy and his feminine energy, and
Mhm.
that he actually has this capacity to dance with all of it, to
Mhm.
dance with life. And yes, to hold me and meet me, but not in this rigid way.
Mhm.
And so for me, there's this quality of take responsibility, take accountability for our own reactions, responses, ideas of what we should be, perception that the feedback or that the request is saying A, B, and C about us, and rather just be down to love each other the best that we can, be
Mhm.
down to respect each other for our similarities and for our differences, to be like, you do this world a lot differently than I do.
Mhm.
You engage with energy a lot differently than I do. And to
Yeah.
hold that not as a you should be more like this, either you should be more masculine so that you can get more done, or you should be more feminine so that you can receive more deeply, whatever it is, but to rather just be in respect of you're a human doing your thing and it's very different from me. And how can we play with charge and attraction and polarity and dynamics and all of that so much more playfully and so much more in a way that's alive.
Yeah.
I definitely, for a long time of my life, had this sort of like, I need to prove myself. I'm also 5 feet tall. So I was like, I can do it myself. And I would always like in the grocery store, I would like climb to the top shelf. I would literally like climb my way up to reach the crackers on the top shelf. And then at some point I was like, what am I trying, who am I trying to prove this to? Like, and what am I trying to prove? And I remember there's one moment where I was like, I'm going to find a man in this grocery store and ask him to reach the thing. And the joy that I see on their face when they're like, why, yes, I can help you reach that box of crackers.
Totally.
I'm like, I
Totally.
need you. Like, it feels so, yeah, it feels so good to actually be able to support each other and to be able to, like you said, the thing we want the most is to be the most amazing partner, lover, friend, brother, sister for each other. And so that's kind of an extended, long winded response to your question. But this respect for each other as the underlying wave hearing, here's what I need, or here's what I desire, or here's what I'm afraid of, or here's the expectation I've had from past experiences or past generations. And then finally, the last piece I'll add is to hold us accountable too. This is something that this is something that Jeff will do when I ask for something and then I make it really fucking hard to give it to me. He's like, "Do you see that? Like, do you see what you just did?" And it's the greatest gift that he can give me because I'm like, "Oh shit, you're right." And so to hold each other accountable, and this is my what I would say to men is like, please, in the most loving, honoring, respectful way possible, help us see too. Help us see the areas where we have built walls around us that actually get in the way from us even receiving what it is that we're asking for. Help
Yeah.
us see that in the most loving, respectful way possible.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That lands. And yeah, and I feel the like the masculine containing energy in that. Even though it's like this very emotionally aware, emotionally insensitive uh, act to be able to see it and feel it, but just like report it as like the weather. Like here's the event that happened,
Yeah.
and here's like the finger trap I find myself in. And my intention is to give you everything that you want right now because it makes me feel on purpose and it's very pleasurable for me to do that. So I'm happy to get the crackers off the I'm happy to get
Totally.
the crackers off the top shelf, but please don't kick me in the shins while I'm trying to do
Totally. Totally. And it's so often it's so
it.
subtle.
And we've extrapolated it into all these complexities, and it's kind of it like I'm often amused by like the is evolved as in dynamic of beings as we now are, like these fundamental sort of like cliche things like still play out in
Totally. And
relationships.
it's so important to not demonize each other or ourselves for it. It's like this is literally my work is moving towards this holding men in reverence and respect. And I have to constantly catch these little things of like, oh, oops, oops, especially if it's in reaction to perceived disrespect from men, to be like, I don't like that. And I'm gonna do my best to not kick you in the shins
Yeah,
because maybe it is an intentional, maybe it is an unintentional disrespect, but like regardless, it's like how do we actually make the choice to move towards something else even when it's so fucking challenging, even when it's so hard, or even when we can barely even see it? How do we stay open to saying, "Oh, I see what I just did there. I see the expectation that I had there." And and leaning into trust. And of course, this is not in situations of deeply unhealthy or abusive dynamics, but as like a general lens to be seeing the world and to be seeing men and to be seeing women through.
yeah, totally. It's important to like hold it all lightly, right? It's like the moment that we hold it and it feels heavy. Now,
Yeah.
like that's the energy that we're projecting onto it. And if I show up to you needing to have a talk, and I feel heavy, and like that's going to be the nature of the conversation that we're. That's going to be our set point
Right.
where we're starting. So like, how can I regulate my system to like hold it lightly and like, isn't that funny? The human thing that that just happened there, uh,
Yeah.
versus this is like fundamentally a commentary on my masculinity or somebody did something wrong, which is just
Totally.
so easy to slip into.
Totally. I think that's such an important tool for, I mean, it keeps coming back to the same thing of what is it that you're embodying? What is the feeling of your embodying of what you're embodying? And then how do you move from there? How do you
Mm.
speak from there? How do you communicate from there? I remember once with my ex, I like had a crush on somebody and I like came up to him and I wanted to like tell him and I sat down and I like brought so much heaviness and so much like weird shamey energy and and I told him and he was like, that's what you needed to tell me? He was like, I want to be excited for you, but like it feels very shamey and weird and like heavy and like I don't really know. He's like, I want to feel excited. And it was such a good reminder. I always think of that where I'm like, oh right, the energy you carry in with communication, of course, taking things seriously and being thoughtful and caring, but like how do I want to enter into this conversation? What energy do I want to embody? What part of me? What's my access point to the energy that I want to
Hmm.
come to this with?
Yeah, and yeah, it just like you have to practice it, right? Like it requires a practice to be attunement with someone else. And thank you for, again, thank you for noticing how I moved through the retreat. Like I feel very attuned to people. Like I feel like I am tracking and noticing, and it's now something through lots of practice doing it. Like I think it's an innate sensitivity and innate perception that we have, and like anything, you practice it, and now it's not something that I even do consciously. One of the pattern, I'd be curious, in your own relationships or in your life or in your work, if you've noticed this pattern, but a woman feeling like she's not feeling the love that she wants to be feeling from her partner.
Yeah.
And when you kind of like, get detective hat on, the man quite often like didn't receive love from his mother, so he doesn't know how to receive it. So his response strategy is he just like gives like love all of the time. He's sort of overcompensating. Like the part of him that like just like deeply wants to receive from the feminine has to like, fill the vacuum. So he's like doing all these things, and it's like not speaking any of his partner's love language, and she's not receiving it at all. So he feels really frustrated, and then just sort of
Mm.
stops doing anything because he's not having the felt experience of my acts of service and my words of affirmation are equaling the felt sense of this loving connection.
Right.
And extrapolate that over 10 years, and now we feel very, very far away from each other, and we feel like the magic and love is just no longer available to us. But like the key to that door is like the experience that the woman naturally wants to have is like
Mm.
she's like wanting her love to be received. Like she's like wanting to give it. She's like wanting him to like receive it in her heart, in his heart. And if we can sort of solve for that energetically in a simple way, which can just literally be as simple as like breathing, like exhaling through your heart center into his heart center through your hand on his heart, and just like spend 10 minutes every so often practicing that, like the
Yeah.
felt sense of just that energy transfer. And I've witnessed where it's sort of counterintuitive, because the story is that I'm not receiving enough, and the story is that I'm I'm giving, but I can't possibly give enough, and somehow we're missing
Mm.
each other there.
Yeah.
But the deep innate need is, that like feminine mother like aspect for her to be able to give to him and for him to be able to receive it, which now feels like fulfillment. And now we have a circuit,
Right.
and now from that place of energetic connection, like literally just energetic connection in our heart chakra, this circuit, now all of the actions and behaviors that are manifesting feel like an amplification of that experience of love that is happening now before you plan a grand romantic vacation for us or whatever
Right.
it is. Like it's never ever ever those things. And if you do
Yeah.
those things without that like physical energetic cord connected, you don't experience them as love and romance anyway.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. And that's why practices are so important because they work.
Yeah.
Right? It's when you actually take a moment to feel the subtle energetics of giving and receiving love,
Hmm.
it gives you that ground for everything to sprout from, for all the sweet little acts to come from, because the flower or the vacation, like you're saying, if it's not grounded in the feeling of true connection, it's not going to feel like that much. And I believe that it is equally as important for us to have our love received as it is for us to receive love.
Hmm.
And so it is just as painful to feel like we're trying to give love and it's not being received as it is to feel like we're not receiving the love that we need. Both of those
Totally.
are equally as important and therefore equally as painful when it's not there.
Totally. Totally.
And I think so often we don't actually even quite know how to articulate what it is that we need, like the feeling of what that loving connection would be like, the feeling, the essence of it. And that's why these practices, like you're saying, simply putting your hand on each other's heart, simply breathing together. If you're in a heterosexual couple, he can breathe out of his cock, she can breathe into her cervix, and then she can breathe out of her heart, and he can breathe into his heart. Doing that
Mm.
for 2 or 3 minutes is going to bring a level of connection and intimacy. It's so simple, but
So
it
simple.
it does so much for our felt sense experience of this person's present with me, this person's giving love, this person's receiving my love. We're actually deeply, truly connected.
Hmm.
And over time, we can also start to articulate what it is that would help us to feel loved. We can
Hmm.
articulate, here are the things. I see you trying to love me. I know how deeply you want to love me. Here's what would help me to feel loved. Or here's sort of like the tonal quality. Let's do a little practice for a minute where we can feel it. This is something that for years I was like, but I want him to just know. I want him to just know how to give it. I want that to just be a natural thing. And then I at some point was like, all right, girl, we gotta be a little flexible here. And I started to really ask myself in each moment, what do I need? What do I actually need? I need a minute of eye contact. I need him to like squeeze my face and tell me I'm the most beautiful being in the world. I need like a slow, long, deep kiss that lasts more than 10 seconds so I can like really fall into it. And once we articulate how we love to be loved, we set each other up for success. We can actually give each other that love in a much more efficient and profound way, because it's like, oh, I'm feeling your heart. I'm feeling your loving feminine essence. I'm feeling your loving masculine presence. And yeah, it gives us so much more to work with.
Do you find that like once you've asked for it and created the imprint that he then starts to do those behaviors start to happen more naturally?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes he's like, that is the weirdest thing that you want right now. And like, now I know that that works for you, that that's like something that you love when you're feeling insecure, when you're feeling a deep longing or whatever. And it's like we get to learn our own love languages. And I don't just mean the 5 or 7 love languages, like the dialects. Like we get to learn our love dialects and how we love to give love, how we love to receive love. And then we get to figure out how to communicate that. And then we get to give each other that in such a better way.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's such a
Yeah.
beautiful way to get to know each other.
Yeah. It's like we're wired to like notice the pain more. And when the pain doesn't go away, we don't think about the absence of pain. So it's like
Mm,
we we don't notice the evolution or the progress or the improvement. And I can imagine, and I've heard that from women and partners before. Like, I just want you to know,
mm,
right? And like, I get that. It's like, I want to just know. Like, I have a story that I should be the best, most romantic lover, partner, and anticipate all of your needs 100% of the time.
mm.
And, and if I'm in 95% is like failing,
Yeah.
which, is like a disheartening, like a
Yeah.
disheartening energy. Right. Yeah. Just talking, kind of bring this back to the expansive sacred union framework a bit, because I think it's relevant. Um, so I talked about this, the natural cycles of evolution. Like there's this moment, the macro and the micro, the bigger picture, like arc of life, and then in like what are we doing right here and now in service of that, right? So at the macro, it's like you go through these processes of death and rebirth. Like there's these moments where like all attachments and all associations and like all of your identity kind of needs to just be let go of and released for a moment, which can either be extraordinarily painful until it's not, or it can be, increasingly more and more effortless and less painful. And that's like making space for a bigger vision, a bigger reality, more intimacy than you thought was
Yeah.
possible,
Yeah.
right? And it's like it's a real trust fall, but like we're kind of either going through that process or not. We're getting stuck at the threshold of this version of this skin that I'm wearing and this version of reality and construct that I'm living in, like is feeling not right to me,
Mm.
and I'm now putting more and more of my energy into like maintaining it from dying, like holding it together, like just keeping my head above water, which is exhausting. And
Right.
that, in work and relationship, and we've all sort of like found ourselves in those cycles and in places. And so it's like, how can we in the present moment, like, notice where we're in maintenance, like notice where the
Mm.
conversations that we're having with ourselves are like justifying the status quo or disempowering in some way, where it's like, if my partner were different, if I had made a different decision 5 years ago, if I, had, like, if I was in better shape, whatever it is, whatever is not here right now that we cannot control in this exact moment, we end up spending more and more and more time in those thought loops, and more and more and more in this state of energetic contraction in the body, until it becomes like a block, until we forget that we ever had those sensations in the first place, that we could ever feel so good.
Mm.
And those stories are increasingly compelling, because there's sort of this unconscious belief that if we just feed them enough energy, if we just think them hard enough, that we will somehow pop out on the other side feeling vindicated, or some sort of eureka moment will happen. And that never actually occurs, right? It just consumes more and more energy and takes up more and more of your space in consciousness. So instead, how can we just begin repurposing some of that super valuable life of time, attention, and energy for creation? So, like what you were just describing in relationship to your partner, took what could be this maintenance cycle of processing, where here's the thing that you did wrong. This is something that is fundamentally true about you, that you always do this thing, and we fall into platitudes, and then we expend a bunch of energy into that, and we ultimately, like, resolution would feel like, well, we didn't break up, like the energy just sort of like settled enough that we're staying together, versus what you did so beautifully and subtly was you just reframed it towards creation of what you want,
Mm.
and what you want to move towards. And you created an opportunity for him to love you better, and then he did that, and he sticks his tongue in your ear, or whatever weird thing it is that he like. And now he's like, great, it feels really good to do that. Like when I put my tongue in her ear and she feels good, it makes, like, I enjoy that because she enjoys that. So now you're getting the tongue in your ear
God, I would hate that.
three, 4 times a week.
Well, and one thing I would add to this also is it is the expression of, here's how you can love me better, but it's also, can I more deeply receive the ways that you love? Can I
Yeah,
actually let
totally.
myself take in the love that you are naturally giving, and the way that you are pouring your love towards me that maybe I haven't been receiving. So it goes both ways.
Yeah, totally, totally.
But either way, it's a creative, it's I'm moving away from I'm bad, you're bad, this is a mess, into how can we open more? How can we get closer? Like you said, it's a creative, it's a creation based
Yeah,
movement.
yeah, totally. And I think it's helpful to have a sort of a north star of like the feeling that we want to feel like as our baseline, like what are we moving towards together, which is in the same way that I was describing what I used in my own life. That the result of following that feeling and cultivating that feeling looked like, inventing this technology and building this company and developing this framework, which is just like an expression of that energy, is one way of thinking about it. So it's like, um, how do you find that in relationship? So
Mm.
there's this way that we feel together that is the most alive, that is the most vibrant, that is the most expressed, that is like both liberated and devoted, however you choose to label it. How do we practice feeling that feeling, so that it can be this thing that is propelling us and moving us forward, and can be, a compass to have us navigate when things are feeling challenging.
Yeah.
But so it's like, that's like a romantic idea, and I often find with couples, you start to ask them questions about that, and it's like almost impossible for them to tune into it, because what I've learned, like energetically, like you need the foundation of connection. Like if we can't feel each other first, if I don't know how to let my system be a mirror of your system, so that when you move, I feel something in my body. Like if we're not listening to each other energetically, then we don't even have a foundation to know what sort of the desire or dream would look like together.
Mm.
And if we don't have charge and polarity, then it's like we don't sort of have like the raw creative tools or materials. So like often what like there'll be times where I do 6 week programs with individuals and couples, and a lot of times like for 6 weeks, like almost the only thing that we're like drilling over and over again in more and more and more circumstances is like, how do we come back to the felt sense of connection?
Mm.
Like how do we come back to the felt sense of connection when we, when somebody's on a work trip and we haven't seen each other, or somebody had where explosive great day at work and something amazing happened and the other person had the worst day ever. It's like,
Yeah.
how do we just come back so like our systems can find each other, so we can move together in unison.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to find, I think, like healthy intimate romantic connection like eros with each other if it's not connected first. So it's like, how do we practice connection and then start to bring in these dynamics and energy of polarity? And it's like, if we are connected and we are like churn the fuck on by each other and by life, all of a sudden the future that we see is completely different than the one we would have tried to imagine before we had those before we had
Totally.
those.
Totally. And so often it's not through words. Like so often it's a somatic, like you said, it's a felt sense experience of connection. And so often that's actually through touch, through some kind of somatic connection. Often
Mhm.
there are also words. Is there something I need to hear or speak? But so often it's actually it's not in the head. It's really in the body. How do we feel each other? How do we feel each other's energy? How do we feel each other's heart? How do we feel each other's body?
Yeah, totally. So good. And yeah, and the good news is that you can feel better right now. The good news is your partner doesn't need to become a completely different human before you can feel connected and loved, and you can build on the momentum from that
Yeah.
consciously together, should you choose.
Beautiful. Thanks so much for speaking to that. And the thread that just keeps coming through all of this is like you feel the felt sense in your body and it completely directs your attention, your life, your relationship, your
Mm.
experience
Yeah.
in the direction that you want it to go. It forms and shapes and carves the pathway for how you want to be living your life, and it always comes back to the body.
Turns
It's
out.
always here. This is where
Yeah.
it's at. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like when it feels like when thoughts feel good, I've found it's like contemplation. And when they don't feel good, it's often rumination. It's like this
Mm.
sort of zero sum feedback loop,
Yeah.
which is in my experience and just like witnessed it over and over again in others, is it's like the mind is trying to make sense of a signal that it's getting from the body, but it doesn't have either identity or culture for one reason or another. It is the reason that it's stuck in a loop is because it can't make sense of what the body's trying to tell it.
Yeah.
And because we're so stuck in our heads, we're completely unaware of the signal in the body. The body just kind of is generally moment over moment, just like kind of like a vague wall of sensation that we might not have any awareness of whatsoever.
Yeah.
But that thing that the mind is doing is actually trying to make sense of something that's coming in the body. And when we use that like a check engine light of like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm in that ruminating thought where I feel stuck and disempowered and it's out of my control, and I'm trying to justify myself. I'm having a conversation, like in my case, I realized that I spent about there's a period where I was spending about 4 to 6 hours a week having a conversation with my brother about my brother to myself in my head, and like feeling really shitty about him and our relationship as a result of that. And
Relatable.
would you like to guess how many minutes I spent actually talking to my brother during this period? Zero. Like zero minutes. Like there was actually, and the like, oh, I got getting like goosebumps right now. The conversation that I was having with myself was very self-righteous and very much about like all the things that I've learned in the world and like the burden of the responsibility for enlightening him more or less. Like that was the conversation that I was having with him. And when I would talk to him, I would show up to him with that energy. I
Right.
would show up to him with the energy of like, since the last time we spoke, I've been having a conversation with you in my head for 40 hours that you are completely unaware of. But I'm bringing all of that energy as though you were a part of that at all. And you were not, you had nothing to do with it. You weren't even present. I wasn't even talking to the actual you, as a matter of fact. But it's almost like I'm bringing the burden of that to you in this conversation.
Yeah.
And he'd feel that, and he would feel my judgment, and he would feel uh, the like way in which I was like not accepting him and not totally present, because I was like, when I actually came in contact with him, I would just like run those stories in the background while I'm like, using conscious relating tools and like patting myself on the back for that. And the whole time, our relationship became him justifying himself to me, him like never asking a question about my life, him like apologizing for himself to me, which was not actual connection. And so then I'd go away and I'd be like, God, that was terrible, and just again, then not talk to him for 3 weeks and run those thoughts and patterns. And then it's like if I could just get him to do ayahuasca, or if I could like it's like all these like I'm like, okay, here's my like 17-step plan to like kidnap him and take him to Burning Man or whatever, right? Like just absurd. Like this is my bid for connection energy of what I'm spending trying to connect with my brother. And we all do this about so many things, right?
Yeah.
Like
Agreed.
like a lot of things in our life. And so my God, my mom, I was expressing frustration about my brother to my mom, and she was like, "Well, if you were coaching yourself, what would you do?" Like, fuck.
Good mom.
I would tell the person to use that, like when you are noticing you're in the thoughts, come back into your body, noticing where you're feeling the sensation in your body. In my case, is like my heart, a contraction in my heart and a contraction in my uh, solar plexus.
Mhm.
So it's like I'm feeling this. Like I want, so the inverse of that is actually what I desire. Like I want to feel my heart open and I want to feel
Yeah.
connection, and I'm giving my power away to be the author of this relationship with my brother. I'm giving my power away to this story about how it's impossible. And so I was like, okay, if I can shift that energy and then meet him with loving presence and just choose connection. And how can I choose connection? I can choose connection by modeling the radical vulnerability that I wish he had, that if he went to Burning Man, he would then become more emotionally attuned and aware. And then I could have the emotional relationship that I want to have with him. Instead, I just get to be like, hey, I have been judging you for 20 years. And it's terrifying to tell you that because I'm afraid that you're going to contract into a black hole and then we won't be even friends or brothers again, and you'll resent me forever.
Mm.
And I have felt guilt and shame about it. And I've been arguing with you to myself in the background and not actually picking up the phone and calling you. And that's absurd. And I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And guess what happened? Right? Like it created an opening.
Yeah.
He then vulnerably wanted to share. And now I feel like I have a relationship with my brother that I always wanted
Yeah.
simply by choosing connection. Like what like it's us in service of connection, and nothing else matters. Like
Yeah.
nothing else is more important, because that's actually the thing that we want to feel. And I don't care if you work at that job for another 20 years, and like the only thing that really matters to me is like that I want you to feel good and I want to feel connected to you.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. There's this book that I never read. I don't know who wrote it, but it's called How to Change Your Marriage Without Talking About It. And I've only heard the title, but that title did so much for me because it's like with
Yeah.
any of our relationships, there's so much that when we bring the feeling we want to bring to it, it completely shifts everything. It completely
Yeah.
shifts it.
And it's like, and it's not magical thinking, and it's not
Right.
bypassing.
Right.
It's like energy physics.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
energy, and it's like the most efficient. It's the most efficient way to just like go directly to the thing, like directly
Right.
to the thing.
And there's a difference between ruminating and like deeply processing what you need to process. And so that
That's
doesn't
right.
mean ignore that and don't ignore this and don't feel the feelings. You can still feel the feelings, process the guilt, the pain, the shame, the whatever is there, but
Yeah.
then also choosing your embodiment, choosing your energy, choosing how you exist in the world.
Yeah. That's
Ah, I
exactly
love
right.
it. So if people want to hear more from you, if people want to hear about your expansive sacred union project or sound bed or any of your creations, how do they find you?
Yeah. You can check out Soundbed at feelopus.com, FEELOPUS. And I think we can put some other things in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll put all the links for everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. This has been so wonderful.
It's been so great to chat with you.
Thank you for this work that you're doing in the world.
Yeah.
It's deeply needed.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's so great to get to know you more and have this conversation, the extension of our 20-minute dinner conversation in Costa Rica. I so appreciate the way that you move in this world, the way that you think, the way that you feel, the way that you listen to the world around you and truly the way that you treat women. Thank you so much. I so
Hmm.
appreciate you.
Thank you for noticing. Have a glorious day. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.